All right, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic morning, noon, or night, wherever you guys are in the world. You're in the right place because we are joined with another awesome guest today on the Crypto 101 podcast. We have today joining Brendan and I. By the way, Brendan, hello. How are you doing today?
Feeling great. Hey there, everyone.
Feeling good. I'm stoked to introduce our guest because this is a Web3 expert, a gaming expert, all things crypto, all things blockchain. We've got Jacobc.Eth, the founder of Hyperplay, joining us today. Jacob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh man, we're excited to dive in because not every day we get to really speak to somebody who's diving into the niche that you are. With Hyperplay. So we want to dive into that. But before we do, we want to get your background and really how'd you come to be in the position that you are?
Yeah, I guess like going way back, I was I was really attracted to early Bitcoin from a political and kind of activist worldview. It was an interest to me, but it wasn't ever something I was like seriously or like from a career perspective involved in. And I worked in Web2 tech, and when I read the Ethereum white paper and started seeing that, I got really kind of annoyingly obsessed. My coworkers would tell you, and so I went and joined Consensus and worked on some early grant funding DAOs. I got to join the MetaMask team, and I worked as leader of operations there.
Oh, wow.
And worked on a lot of the growth and monetization strategies. And I had really seen that the biggest area of growth that MetaMask and de facto the decentralized web were seeing was coming from gaming use cases, but the wallet experience and the user interactions between a game and the player's wallet, there were challenges that needed to be solved. And so I am still advisor for MetaMask, and I still work really closely with the MetaMask team. But I started Hyperplay to solve both the wallet to game interaction problem for games and also the censorship problem, because game developers were being forced to build very strange and bizarre user experiences in order to hack around App Store policies. And there needed to be a censorship resistant and developer loyal distribution platform that actually encouraged people to build in a way that makes sense for Web3 instead of making them terrified that their business is going to be deplatformed. So we launched Hyperplay in March. It's available today in early access, and we're super excited for all the games and projects that are building on top of it.
Well, let me just start this off by saying one of the first conversations I had with Bryce was, what do we think, or what do I think about like Web3 and gaming? Because that is really my niche. And I'm super stoked to be able to just talk about this with you today, because this is really kind of hitting home. So you have this big experience.
Brendan's a big gamer, if you couldn't tell.
Oh, I can. If only you could see the PC that is sitting right behind the camera. It would tell wonders as to where I stand in this scene. But no, everything else aside, Jacob, you have this big, extensive experience when it comes to Ethereum and layer 2s and crypto as a whole. Why are you just now starting to get really excited about Web3? Like, what has you excited to really kind of dig deeper and invest a little bit of extra time and resources into Web3 now?
Well, I've definitely been involved in Web3 for a while, but so I'll just say, like, I think that blockchains are about more than I think a lot of people see this as the next thing or something, and that they're going to get rich or something. And for me, I think that this is a tech that was built to make people more free, to help people to build and structure human social interaction and human collaboration in a way that we want it to be structured. And I think that what's so exciting about Ethereum is its composability and its interoperability. And so the composability allows us to structure our social interactions in the ways that we think make the most sense. And the interoperability is, it allows the early vision of the internet was a more interconnected world. And then we got a bunch of silos based on surveillance. And today, by building the internet around interoperable rails, and giving the internet a financial and transactional layer, it allows us to build ethical business models that ultimately distribute more ownership and power to the people who participate in these systems, rather than for Web2 corporate monopolies.
Yeah, it's like it kind of harkens back to, in your introduction, you talked a little bit about what really got you inclined to the space was kind of like that political idea of like, Bitcoin is this new free money, and that kind of drew you in. And it's almost like what Bitcoin did to money, Ethereum is doing to corporations, if you will, or it's that same level of disruption. And it's but it's like more than corporations. It's like it's identity, it's everything. And it reminded me of your name. Like I wanted to ask, like a lot of people are probably like Jacobc.Eth. Like, does this guy have a last name? Like, what is this? Like, people might not understand what this is. So tell us what your identity, Jacobc.Eth, is, and like what does that mean to you, and how did it kind of come to be?
I think that Web3 identity and Web3 reputation is super important. I think there's some larger meta conversations about how we think about identity and reputation in Web3, and certainly there's a number of people that want sort of what I would consider a pretty dystopian form of Web3 identity that's based on like hashing people's biometric data or something like that. I think that people should be free to have one or many identities, and that we need reputation-based governance. The civil problem isn't universally solvable, but we can understand the long-standing reputation of an identity, what kinds of contributions it's made, and to allow people to hold their identity and use it in a way that has reputation. So my ENS name is an example of that, but I generally think that we'll see a lot more reputation-based governance models for the protocols that people are building, and that's going to play a super important and positive role in terms of how people think about identity.
Yeah, and even like with when I think like with DeFi, even identity is going to come to play a huge part, because there's systems that are out there. Maple is one. True Finance. There's a couple of them that use like reputation-based lending, and you could kind of have like an on-chain sort of credit score that's tied back to your ENS or your address. And I just thought that was interesting. If anybody at home wants to check out those platforms, it's really cool because like you said, it's a really it's a blockchain's a technology that really inclusive, and for people at home who are listening, they're like, well, why do we need an on-chain credit score? Like I could go to a bank and I got my credit score. But like if you're listening to this, you're probably privileged, and like you probably do have some level of like you could go anywhere and swipe your card, but that's not the whole world. And the whole world, sometimes if they want to get a loan or if they want to get a mortgage or whatever, like they need to have identity documents. They need to have credit scores and reputations, or else they're going to get fleeced by a loan shark at 25% rate. And so this technology does blow open the doors to financial inclusion for sure. But yeah, I definitely want to zoom in on Hyperplay and the things that you're building there. I would love for you just to describe, how like a listener at home might, interact with the platform. We've got lots of crossover between crypto lovers and gamers. And so how could somebody kind of bust into the platform and what should they expect?
Yeah, so Hyperplay is a Web3 native game launcher. So if people are familiar with Steam, that's a Web 2 game launcher and distribution platform. Hyperplay does the same kinds of things that Steam does. It helps you discover Web3 games, download those games, and it is also an aggregator of multiple game stores. So we have our own store, the Hyperplay store. It's got about 50 plus or minus Web3 games that are a part of it. We also aggregate the entire Epic Game Store. So all of your games, Web 2, Web 3 games that are in the Epic Game Store, you can actually play inside of Hyperplay. You can play Fortnite, you can play Elden Ring.
Oh, wow.
In any of those games. And we're actually building on-chain representations of your gaming reputation. There's a lot of really exciting things that you can do by aggregating all of the gaming world into a single into the decentralized web and to have an interface for that. And then any game that you launch from within Hyperplay, Hyperplay has an overlay similar to the Steam overlay. So people who've played games in Steam know that you press Shift Tab and then you see a chat window. You can see if you have a notification or achievements, Steam is going to overlay those on top of the game that you're playing, your friends' requests. So Hyperplay does the same kind of overlay, but we actually are persisting your MetaMask wallet into the game. So you can actually approve transactions without ever leaving the context of the game. You can sign in using your wallet inside of a native game. And we support both native or browser-based games. And we'll also be supporting other stores in the future. So we really, our goal is, from an infrastructural perspective, to allow the player to carry their wallet, all of the assets inside of that wallet across every game that they play, across every game store, and really to also provide a really developer loyal platform to the builders so that they're not living in fear of being censored or deplatformed for building a Web3 game.
I love that you brought up Steam as an example, because it is probably the closest thing that we have to this quasi Web3 marketplace. And I say quasi, right? Because you can trade items between players, between games. If I have something from CSGO and someone else has something from Team Fortress 2, we can make a trade for that. But we still can't trade across marketplaces. So say someone has something in Fortnite, someone has something in Valorant, League of Legends, another one of these games that's made outside of Steam, then you can't trade with them. It's cool because you can trade, you can buy, you can sell. The CSGO marketplace alone is a multi-billion-dollar marketplace, which is just a wild thing to say. But do you think that we can get to a place where we can have these like cross-platform trades and orders going through? Because that's what I see as the end game of Web3 and gaming, is that I can trade stuff from Riot's platform and items on Riot. I can make those trades with people who have items in CSGO on Steam, and kind of so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think increasingly people are seeing game developers are building that natively into their games and are building secondary markets in their games. There's also protocols and platforms that are being built that allow people to make on-chain derivatives of centralized assets, which there's some problems with. But I will say that I do think that Web3 is going to enable a lot of use cases that were not previously part of Web 2 and that transcend secondary markets and that do a lot of other things like gaming reputation, for example, and carrying your reputation with you across multiple stores. Like, a lot of like, I'll just give an analogy from like 2017 when the Epic Game Store launched. A lot of players were revolted by the idea of another game store and that some of their games would be in a separate store. And the reason for that was they had their entire reputation, all of their achievements, all of everything they've done in one platform. And to them, that felt interoperable because all the games are here. I have my reputation. I can carry it across all the games. And for it to start fragmenting was, as a very felt fear, a very real thing to a lot of players. With what we are doing today, aggregating all of the stores, aggregating their achievement systems, aggregating everything to do with the traditional, the traditional Web 2 world. This really allows us to create a freer ecosystem for building on-chain reputation, on-chain games, everything that people want. The interoperability ultimately really empowers people to build other things. And there's a lot of other use cases. I mean, people are seeing like extraction shooters where there's like high stakes outcomes in the game where you can loot someone else's bag and you can compete for really difficult to find items with significant outcome and stakes. So I think, or like, like Dark Forest, where you use zero knowledge proofs to have provably fair fog of war. I think we'll see new genres of games created around this tech that didn't exist before, and that it will enable a new ecosystem of things that are genuinely fun and great for people.
Certainly, yeah. I think with the way that everything is kind of unraveling right now, it's a really exciting time because there's so many different ways that this can be used. And so I'm excited to see kind of how it progresses. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a cool one.
Yeah, I think what I've heard some stats from like hedge fund managers and stuff are talking about like the next billion crypto users are going to come from crypto gaming and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely want to like kind of get your thoughts on just adoption curve or whatever of crypto gaming, but also along the same lines, like, do you like the stance that crypto gaming has right now, or it's like its marketing angle, or do you think that like crypto should be obfuscated into the background and like we should only focus on gaming and the tech is just the tech?
Yeah. I think that first of all, I'll just say that blockchains, games are a bridge to the decentralized web. And if you looked at the 2021-2022 period, a lot of that growth came from places like the Philippines, Vietnam, Nigeria, Brazil, Colombia. Those were countries where there are millions of people that are locked out of traditional financial systems that onboarded to play games and then discovered through that decentralized finance and were able to leapfrog the traditional financial system and become owners and become empowered in the various different protocols in which those people participate. I think that there is a number of people, there's a common cycle that exists in our ecosystem. When there are bull markets, so like if we go back to like the 2012, 2013 bull market of Bitcoin, people are building in a super, trying to build all of these interesting things on top of Bitcoin. Then, in the bear cycle of 2014, people became very depressed. They stopped building, and then they try to appeal to the most conservative thing. And at the time, it was like convince gas stations to take Bitcoin and stop building things. And then you have like the 2015 to 2017 bull market around ETH and things like that. And then in the downturn after that, people were like, no, this tech is never going to be broadly adopted. We need to obscure it away, and we need to adopt like enterprise blockchain things. And so many ETH people in the 2018, 2019 period tried to pivot to enterprise blockchain, and that they thought that this would be obscured away. And then ultimately, very little was built in the world of enterprise blockchain. And the things that actually ended up taking off were things that built in a more Web3 native way, that really doubled down on the value propositions of blockchains, that didn't try to compromise what this was. And then, and then we had this bull cycle of late 2020 DeFi summer to the FTX debacle. And now you hear a lot of people, just like happened in these other historical cycles, suddenly thinking that we should pivot blockchains or pivot our products to hide the Web3 aspects, and to not talk about those value propositions. And people say Web 2.5 or whatever, and then they flatten it to basically just secondary markets for assets. And I think that a lot more is possible here. The interoperability of identity, the interoperability of the assets, third-party developers building games that connect to the contracts of another game. There's so much more that can be constructed. I think that when people get really scared in the lowest lows of market cycles, that feels like retreating to a more Web 2 world feels like an answer to a lot of people. I think that we should both make blockchains more accessible and make the user experience more accessible for people, but also we shouldn't hide the fact that we're building Web3 tech, that we believe in decentralized protocols, that we believe in the extensibility and interoperability of these protocols, that those value propositions need to not be lost in the message. And we need to not let the depression of this market take people to build things that you don't even really need a blockchain for. I mean, like the secondary markets, like Diablo had a secondary market in 2011, 12, and like it was fine. I mean, it inflated.
Got the job done.
I think some of the most successful games and platforms are the ones that allow you to have a personality and a profile, somewhere where people can go and say or see that, hey, I'm level 515. Here are all of my achievements. Here are all of my items. By attaching some sort of achievement or identity system, whether they have a monetary value or not, it creates a competitive environment. And people like to see, oh, hey, this is the number one guy in the world, or this is the most advanced player, or this is the person who has the most playtime. This is the person that I want to aspire to be. They have the coolest items, whatever it could be. And in other games, it's like, oh, hey, this person has a $5 million inventory of everything that I could ever dream of. It can vary so much, but that's where we really see the most success when it comes to gaming. And I think that Web3 is the perfect way to complement that and bring it to the next level, because it can really expand on all the areas that we've been talking about, except make them better. It can be cross-applicable. It can kind of booster this environment. And so my question is, if we are to start seeing that, like on the mainstream gaming stage in Web3, what would that do to the user base? What do you think that would do to the user base?
I'm not sure I fully understand that.
So if we start seeing these Web3 practices like applied to mainstream games from big names, like what do you think that will do to the user base? Gaming across the world already has about a 40% market share, which means that almost 40% of the people in the world are playing games. Do you think that number would like astronomically increase if the mainstream, the big wig game creators start applying Web3 practices? Because that would essentially incentivize more people to kind of jump in, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of interesting implications. And it's worth like considering what the legacy models are to answer this. So like, the traditional model of $60 game, you'd have to develop it as a game developer for, I don't know, 2 to 4 years is our common game development cycles. And you're taking on massive amounts of risk as a game developer. And so at the end of that cycle, you release the game, it succeeds or it fails, and the business is either in ruins or it does well. And that business model was really dangerous for a lot of game developers. It led to things like Konami, the largest game development shop in Japan, abandoning making games. It led to a transition to other business models like mobile gaming, which surged in the last decade. And the problem with in the mobile gaming world was gotchas and paywalls and play this game for free for 40 hours and then we drop a difficulty bomb on you and then you need to spend $1,000 to finish the game. Introducing just pay to win mechanics where people don't even want to play the game anymore. And it's not like game developers want to make these models. It's that they have to find a sustainable business model to do their creative trade. So I think that the Web3 game model is so innovative and radical and empowering because it allows the game developer to release a product that expands over time iteratively. So, if the business model allows for a portion of the trading of the assets in the game to be shared, the fees to be shared with the game developer, the more activity you build in a game's world, the more that grows the revenue of the game developer. So suddenly it's not like the game developer releases this and then maybe they release a couple DLCs and then they abandon the game. And then all of the fans are left hoping, well, I hope in 5 or 10 years they make another game. And instead, it expands the game's world over and over. And the more that game world expands and the more that players adopt it and enjoy it, the more that the game developer grows their revenue. And it allows the game developer to build iteratively and to see if something is working in a feedback loop with their customers, which is what we do in almost every other industry. Like we don't spend 4 years developing, I don't know, like a rideshare app and then find out if people found it interesting. We release like businesses that are iterative, and then we learn from the customer in a feedback loop and we build better products. And so this is the opportunity to do that in the games industry and to do it in a way where you have the network effects of blockchains. And it's not just even one game that's succeeding. The more that any games succeed in this industry, we're creating a category that onboards more people into Web3 and the assets are interoperable. And the growth of the Web3 gaming economy grows things for all of the game developers and all of the players too. And so it's a flywheel that grows and helps developers and players alike in a virtuous cycle.
Yeah. And like kind of with all this adoption that's coming and that we're, anticipating, kind of my last question is like, is Ethereum ready? Is the technology there to scale? I know we've got layer 2s, we've got all sorts of new tech. But in your opinion, are we ready for the prime time?
Well, I think that we're going to see a lot of innovation and growth of block space, the growth of better blockchain tech that's going to continue happening. I'm actually I wrote the founding proposal for a layer 2 blockchain, which is Mantle, which specifically, even though it's a layer 2 on top of Ethereum, it uses an EigenDA, which is an external data availability layer in order to significantly save on gas. And I'll kind of just, for people that may or may not be aware of this and how it works, traditionally in the layer 2 model, all of the data is posted to the Ethereum L1. But the Ethereum L1 is actually not built for storing data. It's not a data protocol. It was not meant for that. And there are some proposals around like donk sharding and stuff like that improve its data storage capacities, but ultimately it is not a data protocol. EigenDA and EigenLayer. EigenLayer is a set of contracts that allow you to use Ethereum to secure an external protocol using an Ethereum validator and using ETH staking and restaking. With Mantle, a lot of what we built was the ability to have a more efficient data protocol while also still having that external data protocol derive a very significant amount of security from Ethereum and to keep things tethered to the decentralization of Ethereum. I think that Mantle is going to be a better L2 for gaming use cases. And we in Hyperplay are actually deploying some things that are not announced yet, but which are going to be on chain and will have a really significant, I'll just say, a reputation component for players that's coming soon. And so we're really excited about that. I think that the tech of the chains and the efficiency to bring more and more on chain is increasing. I think we're at a period where there's a range of use cases that are possible today. The more this tech scales, the more the diversity of use cases become possible. It's actually really similar to like the 1999 cycle in like the period before it, where people were pitching a lot of internet use cases that were not possible. Like, remember pets.com, that was an
kind of ran before they could walk, in a sense.
Yeah, it was a business that was impossible to build in 1999. But I am a subscriber to Chewy. I buy great treats for my dog. It's literally pets.com.
They fulfilled the vision.
It's just the tech has to mature there, and so I think that we're going to see the tech maturing in a range of ways, and the use cases that people want to see are going to start happening iteratively over time.
Yeah, I definitely think the future, I mean, this is cliche, but like the future really does belong to the visionaries, like the people that could kind of see the eventuality of where that tech is going to be, not where it is. It's like, like Netflix. Like I always think about like Netflix and Reed Hastings, who was like, going to bet on the whole new business model. And, I think what we're doing, or what you're doing here is very similar to that. It's just a complete upending of the model. And it's beautiful. It's cool to watch. And hey, man, when you guys have those next big announcements that we alluded to, I'd like to bring you back and have you on for another show. Be incredible. But Jacobc.Eth from Hyperplay. Man, thank you so much for joining us. Where can we ask our viewers to go and to stay tuned with all your updates?
Yeah, so hyperplay.xyz is where you can download Hyperplay today. Give it a try. We've also got a Discord server, socials. You'll find all those on the website, or Hyperplay Gaming on Twitter. But the number one thing I'd recommend is go give it a try. Play some Web3 games, have some fun, and give us some feedback.
Love it. All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And Jacobc.Eth, thank you for joining us.